Leiby in New York City is an opulent fine dining restaurant serving elaborate tasting menus and luxurious dishes. Their burger, however, is unquestionably one of Leiby's most intriguing offerings. It's made of 45-day dry-aged Angus beef, but only 9 are served a night and they're only served at the bar. Plus, the burger isn't cheap. It has a $46 price tag. Frankly, I had to see if it was worth it. Today I'm here in New York City, right along the Hudson River. It's a semi-decent day out, a little overcast, but I'd like to talk about the epic burger that I had the other week. A couple of weeks ago, I finally got to have one of my New York City bucket list burgers. I had the burger at Leiby. Now, obviously, it isn't just any burger. The restaurant uses 45-day dry-aged beef for their burger, which is pretty ridiculous considering that most steakhouses don't even age their steaks that long. It's also not the easiest burger to obtain. They only serve it at the bar, and there's only 9 available each night. If that sounds familiar, it is, because Leiby is not the only restaurant these days serving their burger in limited quantities. Rules does it with their burger, Lord's does it with their burger. This is unfortunately becoming an annoying trend, but I get it. These restaurants are businesses, and to generate hype around their products, it somewhat makes sense, but still, it's annoying. Because of that, I had to get to Leiby right when it opened so I would be able to ensure that I would get one of the 9 burgers. Fortunately, you can make reservations for the bar, which makes things easier. However, I went as a walk-in because the restaurant requires a $150 deposit to be able to make a reservation. Now, requiring a deposit like that does make sense if I were going for one of the tasting menus, but just going for a burger, that seemed like a little too much, so I took a chance and went as a walk-in. Luckily, I was able to get in, but I was also a little intimidated about the restaurant because I read the Google reviews before I went, and there are a lot of positive ones, but there are also a number of negative ones that kinda scared me a bit. Having said that, this was my experience at Leiby and my thoughts on their burger. Leiby is located on a beautiful street in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of New York City. The restaurant is the product of Chef Angie Mar, who first made a name for herself at the Beatrice Inn. In fact, the historic restaurant was actually located right next door to Leiby. Chef Mar transformed the Beatrice Inn from a 0-star restaurant in which former New York Times food critic Pete Wells labeled the menu as awful to a 2-starred establishment in which Wells christened the Beatrice Inn as one of the most celebratory restaurants in the city. Sadly, the restaurant shut its doors at the end of 2020. Fortunately, Chef Mar was able to secure the space next door, which he first transformed into a luxurious French restaurant called Les Trois Chevaux, which then later transitioned to Leiby in the fall of 2023. I was definitely excited to try the restaurant, but when I arrived to the establishment, things got off on the wrong foot. Leiby is supposed to open their doors at 5 p.m., but unfortunately on my visit, guests weren't invited in until about 6 or 7 minutes after 5. Fortunately, that's a small issue for me, and more importantly, I got one of the coveted seats at the bar, ensuring that I would be able to order the burger. The restaurant was much smaller than I thought it would be. There's a beautiful marble-top bar along with a row of tables behind it. Staff members were elegantly dressed in white jackets and bow ties. It looked like Leiby could easily fit into a James Bond film. In a nod to the past, there was even the old sign of the Beatrice Inn tucked away in a corner. For what it was, I certainly appreciated the atmosphere of the restaurant. Once I was settled, I began to look at the menu, but not the food menu because I was only given the beverage list. I'm not a fan of when restaurants do that because I choose what I drink based off of what I eat. Luckily, it wasn't that big of a deal for me at the time because I knew exactly which courses I would order. Regarding the beverage list, there was a fine selection of wine, including some impressive wines by the glass, but I felt like a cocktail and they weren't cheap. Prices started at $28, and considering that I got a fine cocktail at the 3 Michelin-starred Le Bernardin for only $24, that seemed a bit excessive. Nevertheless, the options were intriguing, and I ended up ordering the Bemmelman at the Ritz. The drink is basically a martini. It contains caviar vodka, English oak smoked vodka, Japanese bitters, and a coating of salt along the rim. Now that was a fine martini. Having 2 vodkas incorporated into the drink was interesting, but it worked. One of the vodkas was actually infused with caviar, lending the beverage a sense of decadence that was perfectly fitting to the elegance of the restaurant. I could see some martini purists taking issue with the beverage, but to me the essence of the martini was there, and more importantly, it was a damn fine beverage no matter what you called it. In fact, Esquire named the cocktail as one of the best in America. Finally, I was presented with the food menu. At Les Bee, one could order a la carte or go for one of the 2 tasting menus. To put it simply, Les Bee is very expensive. For instance, the seasonal tasting menu goes for $325. There's a soup course, which sounds incredible by the way, and it's sold for $42. There's also a stuffed pig's trotter that goes for $150. Les Bee's food has a French influence and is a nod to past eras of decadence. Despite the prices, the courses sounded incredible, but I was after their burger, and it's not listed on the official menu, but it is showcased on the restaurant's online menu. I also have to mention that when I was presented with the food menu, I was given the longest explanation of the offerings that I've ever experienced in a restaurant. The server, who was incredibly nice by the way, spent around what felt like 5 or so minutes detailing the options. Now, I found it interesting, but I felt like that was just too long. A bit after ordering, I received my first course. I figured that since I was at Les Bee, I should get a couple of other items besides the burger. I started off with the salad chinoise, which contained bitter greens, sesame, satsuma, and lace of chicken roti. Without a doubt, that has got to be one of the most beautiful salads that I have ever seen. It was a work of art. Now, a salad is not the kind of course that gets me out of bed in the morning, but I was pretty damn excited about trying that one, and I wasn't disappointed. That salad was fantastic. The vegetables of the course were crisp and fresh, but the flavor of the dish was interesting and complex. There was a slight spice and acidity, but it also had a pleasant savoriness with the chicken. Basically, roast chicken fat was added to the salad, which gave the dish an excellent heartiness. It was great because the course at the same time didn't feel too heavy, but it also didn't taste like some light, healthful dish that would leave one longing for something more substantial. I also appreciated how the chicken fat and chicken jus were utilized to fashion the lace-like tuile on top of the salad. Overall, that really was a great dish. After finishing, it was time for what I truly came to the restaurant for, the burger. The dish is a sort of carryover from Angie Mar's legendary Beatrice Inn. Visually, the burger had a great look to it. It's nothing over the top, but it looked good. Plus, I loved the elegant glass plate it was on. It made the course feel just a bit more special. Included with the burger was a good-sized portion of fries, which seemed promising as well. Finally, it was time to try one of my New York City bucket list burgers, and I was blown away. That first bite was intense. My palate was smacked with the most powerful dry-aged flavor. Taking a good look at the meat, Les Bee utilizes an 8-ounce patty of 45-day dry-aged Angus beef. The blend is made primarily from ribeye. In fact, the restaurant treats the burger in a similar fashion to how top-tier steakhouses treat steak. Although for most steakhouses, 45 days is definitely at the upper end of the dry aging process, with many steak restaurants instead going for around a 30-day aging. As a result, that was probably the most flavorful burger patty that I've ever had. In terms of the temperature, Les Bee is a staunch proponent of serving their burger medium rare, and it certainly was. Of course, the beef is only one element of the dish, and the topping certainly played a role. On top of the patty was a rich French dauphinoise cheese. It's sort of similar to brie, but a bit more creamy. Now, it wasn't a super bold cheese, but its creaminess and mild flavor paired nicely with the intense dry-aged beef. The other component within the burger were the red wine caramelized onions, which provided a nice sweetness and balance to the strong, funky, dry-aged flavors of the meat. Sandwiching everything together was a fresh and toasted brioche bun. As a whole, that burger was a masterpiece, and one that I now consider to be among the best that I've ever had. However, I still consider the Black Label Burger from Minetta Tavern to be my all-time favorite, mainly because I thought it was just a bit better balanced. For instance, the caramelized onions on the Black Label Burger were sweeter and thus provided a stronger and more pleasant contrast to the dry-aged beef. Nevertheless, and like I said, Les Bee's burger is still a masterpiece. Besides the burger were the fries, which I found to be very tasty. They were thin cut, had a solid flavor, and a nice crunch to them. The fries also contained just the right amount of salt and proved to be the perfect accompaniment to the burger. In addition, it does appear that the fries are different from the ones that were paired with the burger when it was served at the Beatrice Inn. Overall, the burger and fries were everything that I hoped for and more. It was sad when I finished them both, but I of course saved room for dessert. Regarding the dessert menu, there were some nice sounding options, but ultimately I went with the Empress cake. That was a nice looking dessert, although I only discovered that after I leaned in and squinted because that dish was incredibly small. Now, I wasn't expecting a Cheesecake Factory sized dessert, but I wish that it was just a bit larger. The dish consisted of bitter chocolate, sweet cara cara, Grand Marnier, and a coffee emulsion. Despite its size, I was still of course eager to give it a go. The cake was nice. It had an excellent chocolate flavor and a spot-on texture. However, I had some issues with the dessert. For one thing, the coffee emulsion were the most microscopic little dots surrounding the cake. As a result, they didn't add a good coffee kick like I was hoping for. Plus, if I were a slower eater, I would seriously be concerned that those emulsion dots would simply evaporate before I finished. I also had an issue with the slivers of the cara cara between the specks of coffee emulsion. Now, cara cara is a very pleasant type of navel orange, and from a presentation standpoint, it looked nice. However, I thought that adding an element of citrus to the cake could have been done in a far more sophisticated manner than just laying it out on the plate. To sum it up, it wasn't a bad dessert, it was good, but it could have been better, and with the $26 price tag, I was expecting more. After finishing, I was given a final bite in the form of a small but pleasant cookie. Then it was time for the bill, which totaled to $139.35, but with my tip, I spent about $166. I should also point out that upon seeing the receipt was when I first learned how much my burger actually cost, which was $46. I knew it wouldn't be cheap, but that was the most expensive burger that I've ever had, and luckily it was also one of the best burgers that I've ever had. Unfortunately, I do think that the restaurant is overpriced, and it isn't the first time one of Angie Mar's establishments has come under scrutiny for the cost. In 2017, Ryan Sutton of Eater New York gave a harsh critique at the Beatrice Inn, which paid a strong focus to the restaurant's prices. For instance, Sutton highlighted the $485 cost for an elaborate shellfish platter. Coming back to Les B, the hospitality was excellent. Everyone was very nice and were true professionals. However, things moved far too slow. I was there 2.5 hours, and considering I only had 3 courses, I should have been out an hour sooner. Despite those issues, there was still a lot that I loved about the restaurant, and I hope things improve in the future. With some fixes, I could even see Les B with a Michelin star, and I will certainly be rooting for it. Overall, that was a good meal. It wasn't a perfect meal, but my God, was that burger good. With just a single bite of that burger, it catapulted itself to my top 5 favorite burgers of all time. It's probably in my top 3 favorite burgers of all time. That dry aged flavor was truly something else. I mean, that was heaven. Now, because of the wide variety of burger styles and tastes out there, there's no one prescription for the perfect burger. For me, I love dry aged beef, and it felt like Les B's burger was almost made just for me. However, we've got to talk about the price, because $46 for a burger is a hell of a lot. Unfortunately, I do feel like Les B is overpriced. I mean, $28 cocktails, $42 soup. It is a very costly restaurant, which is a shame because I absolutely love their menu. There are so many intriguing dishes on there that I would love to try in the future. Yes, I definitely want to return to Les B one day to try their tasting menu. Although that could be a while from now because, like I said, it's expensive, and when there are so many restaurants with Michelin stars out there that do seem to offer better value, it's hard to go to a place like Les B and justify that price tag. However, I had an overall positive experience at the restaurant because that burger was something truly special. Plus that salad was so ridiculously good. The dessert was good, but yeah, it was a letdown. Now I know a lot of people would never spend as much as $46 for a burger. It's crazy, I know, but if you're willing to bite the bullet, you will literally have one of the greatest burgers you could ever have. To sum it up, the burger at Les Bee is a masterpiece. Their menu is very intriguing, although I do feel that it is a bit overpriced. Nevertheless, I hope to one day return to Les Bee.